Moo.
Now we all know Pole Position and Pole Position 2 are awesome driving games, but they're not very reliable. It's pretty common to see a broken pole position, quite a bit more common than a working one. But there's a few things that we can do to help. There's three things we want to address on this pole position. We need to bypass the edge connector. We need to do something about the fuse F3. And we need to do something about the cooling. So let's start with the edge connector. Originally from the factory, the power came from the dual AR2 boards down here, up through the wiring harness, through an edge connector. There's one edge connector for the CPU on this side and one edge connector for the video board on the other side. They had a couple of power wires and a couple of ground wires, and these edge contacts, as they get older and start to get dirty and make poor contact, then this connection heats up and it will melt the edge connector and cause your voltage to drop, which will cause the AR2s to put out more voltage and make the problem worse. So it's a pretty bad deal all around. The way that you can fix this is to bypass the edge connector in some manner. The way I chose to do it was to run jumper wires from my AR2s down here up to the test points on the boards. So I used 12 gauge wire, which is complete overkill. I wouldn't do that if I were you, but that's what I had. So I've got 12 gauge wire here that connects onto, there's a ground test point and a 5 volt test point. I bring it in here and join it into the main harness and run it down to my AR2. There's a test point to hook the ground to, but the plus 5 on my AR2 did not have a test point. So I connected it to the leg of this resistor, and that seemed like a pretty good spot to hook it into. You could scrape one of your traces on the back and solder it in there, but this thing was hanging out in the open and prevented having to modify the board in any way, so I soldered it on there. I've got quick disconnects on these, on the ones that are soldered on. In case I need to remove the AR2, I can unplug these. And I use 90-degree crimp connectors so that this slides nicely back into the cage without it running into the side of things. One thing that's important is each AR2 goes to a specific board. So one AR2 will go to your CPU board on one side and one will go to your video board on the other. When you jumper the AR2s, you want to make sure that you've got the same AR2 jump to the same board as the edge connector. If you don't do that, you're going to have some issues with the voltage regulation because it's going to be changing the voltage on the other board. It's pretty easy to figure out. Just go down to your AR2 and unplug one of the power blocks to your AR2, and then look at your red lights on your board and see which one turns off, and then you'll know that that goes to that board. We're looking here now at the fuse block and another real problem area for the pole positions. There's a fuse on here that's labeled F3, and almost everyone with a pole position has had some type of issue with this fuse. The problem was that they're sending more power through this fuse than the fuse holder and the connectors were really designed to handle. They originally came out with a 20 amp fuse for F3. Later on that was revised to a 25 slow blow, which are kind of hard to find. But we need to do something with this. It's probably, if you have a pole position at this point, there's probably already been something done with it. One of the things you can do is go down to Radio Shack and pick up one of these inline fuse holders and solder this in here, and that will fix your problem. That'll take care of it. But I really think there's a more elegant solution, and that's what I did here. So let me take the cover off. Now I've taken off the cover and you can see the fuses here. I think the best way to fix this, for me anyway, was to replace this fuse block. Now Bob Roberts sells that 5-position Atari fuse block, and so you can pull out your old one that's probably melted anyway and snap in a brand new fuse block, and while you're at it, you should go ahead and order the 25 amp slow blows from Bob, since they're a little hard to come by. So that fixes part of the problem, which is that your old fuse block probably won't make contact with the fuse, and you've got a brand new fuse, but you still got the issue of the quick disconnect. Those things were not really made to handle 25 amps, and so the only thing left to do there is to solder those wires for F3 only directly to the fuse tab. So if you solder these two wires to the fuse tab with a brand new fuse block and a brand new fuse, you won't have any trouble at all. The last thing that you need to address will be the cooling of the board. These pole positions did not originally come from the factory with a fan, and Atari figured out later in the run of the video games that that was a bad idea, as the circuit boards overheated and fried some of the custom ICs. So in the later pole position models, they added a fan. This is an earlier pole position, and it's got a copy of the late model fan set up in it. So the late model games have this cardboard tunnel. It's sealed on the back end, and this one's made out of matte board from Hobby Lobby. It's about the same thickness and stiffness as the original. And then I've just got a fan mounted up here that blows out, and then you need to cut a hole in the back of your cabinet to let the fan blow out, and the factory ones also had a matching hole on the other side to let air in. So as the hot air rises from the boards, it comes up and gets exhausted out through this tunnel and gets blown out by the fan. This will keep your chips cool and make your board last longer. Well, I hope you found that helpful. Now go prepare to qualify.